Hello to all of our listeners. I'm super happy that you've joined us, and I know that you are not going to be disappointed by this conversation. So I'm here with Michael Doane, my friend and co-author, to introduce our upcoming book and more on the book later. But more importantly, what we're really here to talk about is what we consider to be the new business imperative, super user networks. So hello, Michael.
Well, hello, Ginger.
So why don't you just give them a quick introduction to you?
Okay. My name is Michael Doane. For those of you that are in the world of SAP, you may know a couple of my books. One is SAP Blue Book, a concise business guide to the world of SAP, which is generally a demystifier of what the hell SAP is for everyone, and most especially business people who need to know. Second book is SAP Green Book, Thrive After Go Live, which is dedicated to everyone who's implemented SAP and not gotten sufficient value out of it. So post-implementation strategies and the like. And another book that I did write with John Reed in 1999, for those of you who still care, is the SAP Consultant Handbook, which I'm told is selling very, very well in Russia, if you're heading that way. And now, and as Ginger mentioned, very pleased to announce to this audience, going forward, a new book coming out in October that I've written with the illustrious Ginger, our book, which is entitled The Super User Revolution. And we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk a little about why what is in the book matters to all of you going forward. Right there, Ginger?
Yeah, absolutely. And so why don't we go ahead and get started with this great conversation directly targeted at super users. All right.
Okay.
And that is why a super user network. And let's start with the alternative. So if you don't have a super user network, or you say you don't need one, what's the alternative? Well, I'll tell you that the alternative is you still have super users. You have them by design or by default. If you have them by default, they're out there supporting users because that's who they are. They're just passionate about doing that. But we can't really govern that. We can't enhance that. We can't help them. They're not connected to the whole. And they're just what we have today, a group of people that are siloed within the organization and not connected to the business process and the cross-functional business process. So, Michael, what do you have to add to that?
Well, I've noticed up until we got to the positive end, all I could see in many, many cases through the years, if you like, I got around SAP beginning in 1995, and what I would see is failure. 1995, 96, people were teaching their end users how to use SAP, but there was one major problem, and that is that before they got SAP, they were using individual applications. Again, SAP was the first big integrated suite of applications. Prior to SAP, these users were accounting, sales order processing, purchase order processing, stock control, etc., individual applications that they were changing every 3 years or so. And so the users, by hook or by crook, got refresher training every 3 years or so. In came SAP, where, according to the implementation methodology, the penultimate task before going live is teaching the end users how to use the software. But the trouble is, they didn't change the software 3 years later, or even 6 years later, or ever at all, and yet the users are still needing more and more refresher training, and there was no way for them to get it. That was the first thing that I saw. And various iterations of that, by which when people were asking me what was the ROI for continuous end-user training, I couldn't give them an ROI, but I could only tell them how much money they were losing as their ROI was going out the back door, because while they were investing all of their money in licensing software, paying for consultants, going through the project and the pain of implementing the software, if the users weren't trained in how to use it, it was like driving the brand new shiny Lamborghini directly into the ditch over and over and over again. And so that was my many years introduction to the need for what we're talking about today, super users, and most especially a super user network. So a negative that leads to, hopefully, for all of you who can follow our advice, a definite positive.
Yeah, and I'll say with my experience, because I've been playing with super users for 20 years now. So I really started with super users in 1997 and just became very passionate about this space. That's why I'm here today. And even now today, you still have conversations that go something like this. Hey, Mr. IT director, your end users out there, you told me you don't have super users, your end users out there, how do they get support? Who do they go to for support? Well, they usually lean on each other, which that's inherently a problem because if they don't have the latest and greatest and updated information, we've got sticky note syndrome. So Bob over here gives this new user, Sarah, a sticky note and says, hey, when you go and save that transaction, use this account code because it always works. And so Sarah plugs the account code in and she says, oh, Bob, that worked. Great. I get to go home today on time. Wonderful. And she continues to use that account code because SAP says, great, I'll save that for you. And then only to find out that account code was incorrect, but SAP had no idea it was incorrect. It was saving it all day for her. And the finance folks down the stream are fixing the problem down there because it's easier to just go in there and fix it than it is to go and address it with anyone who's doing the wrong thing. And that gets to your point, Michael, about not training the end users, not having any type of support, and that including refresher training for them. And then the other piece of that, and this is the flip side, who else are they going to for support? Are they going to the help desk? And I still get many cases where someone says, well, they called the SAP IT team. Do you see how expensive that support model is? And there's not a leader out there that disagrees that that's a highly expensive support model and that we should have our SAP IT resources focused on much different tasks than helping someone reset a password or even answering a business process question that should be answered within the departments. But unfortunately, there are way too many companies that don't have that shored up now, and that's just a support model that they have.
And all of these painful things that we're describing to you, ladies and gentlemen, all have at the source the very, very same thing, and that is that people don't know, most especially senior management, including the people who run the projects by which you implement this software, including the people at SAP, do not know what the role of an end user really is. They seem to get across that you're going to use the software. That's why you're called a user. Well, you're using the software for a purpose. It is to fulfill business processes. The only people who actually fulfill the business processes that are designed by business process owners and smart consultants and business analysts and the like are the people you call end users. They alone do it. If they do it wrong, I don't care how beautifully your processes are designed, the end result is bad. You have a flawed business process fulfillment, and this is bad business all around. Once people begin to fit it into their brains, the importance of what you call end users as people who actually fulfill all of the business processes of your firm, then they begin to get the respect that they're due and the support that is necessary to follow.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, I had a conversation just 2 weeks ago with a company, and this is someone that's on the IT side. So I'm talking to her about super user programs, and she is getting really excited about the prospects of this in her company. And she's relaying to me this story, and this has been a story repeated over and over that it just amazes me why we haven't gotten further than this. So she talks about how they had their SI, their systems integration company, that was in there helping them with their implementation. And for quite some time after their go live, they had that team helping them with their end user support. And it continued for so long that people were just yielding to them. And so they were doing the function of the end user, and they got so complacent in that when it was time for the SI to leave, they left, and they left with all of that knowledge. And they said that they had an awful time of that. And obviously they had errors that were happening in the system that were having to be corrected, dirty data getting into the system. And when you talk about dirty data, I think you start having to talk about the impact of that dirty data. I mean, let's just talk about one little case. Let's say you have somebody that uses an incorrect shipping address, or someone entered an incorrect shipping address that gets used, and a product gets shipped out to the customer and it's the wrong customer. you know the trickle effects of what happens and how costly that is to the company. Unfortunately, what has not been happening is when those types of activities or mal activities happen, we're not taking that and we're not putting quantifiable dollars associated with that and then hooking it on to the core reason why that happened. And in that case that I'm talking about, it happened because we didn't have adequate support and training of our end user audience. It would have been much less expensive to train them and support them than it would have been for, number one, the cost of shipping to an incorrect address, the direct cost of that, and then the indirect cost of the irritation to the customer and the possibility of losing a customer. Right, Michael?
Right. And it's, again, if we have to actually scroll this back to the top. I've done a lot of consulting with the C-level people. I've done a lot of public speaking. Again, I've written the books. And I'm often asked, pointed questions by C-level people about what they're doing right and wrong. They never ask me about the end users, so I have to bring it up for myself. And it's incredibly depressing, the constant answers I get when I'll say, how are your end users doing? Because there's knee-jerk responses, they're doing just fine. And I simply then come back and say, what if I were to interview a few of them? And they'll tend to say things like, well, oh, yeah, you might have a point there. But they tend to conclude with, well, Michael, it's just end users. They'll figure it out. And I tell them over and over again, they'll figure it out is not a strategy, but it carries on until you can get across to the people what I just mentioned earlier, that it is their end users who fulfill business process. And if they do it badly, everything else was just practice, because in reality, you're doing everything badly, no matter how good your software is. So think about, as well, the training that goes on for end users. There are, as we talk about often, Ginger, there are 4 areas, those of you who are listening, necessary for an end user to master. And not just learn, but master. Obviously, they're taught the functionality. They learn how to use their mouse, to navigate around the system, to fulfill whatever function it is they fulfill. They do learn some navigation, but they don't always learn all of the navigation, and so they're working more slowly than they would otherwise. They should be learning to use the query function for when questions arise for which there aren't standard reports. And most importantly, they need to understand their role in a complete business process so that when they're fulfilling their part of it, they know what's happening downstream from them, and they can also predict what's happening upstream from them in the business processes so they can work cross-functionally. And that's what leads us to why a network is necessary, as opposed to simply teaching individual end users more and more about their roles.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I'll tell you that the phrase cross-functional collaboration is huge right now. Everyone is talking about cross-functional collaboration. And when you get in there and you talk to business leadership, they want to shore that up. I just recently made a post out on LinkedIn, and it was in response to a post out there by Elon Musk, and he was sending an email to his entire organization talking to them about the protocol that he wanted in terms of communication and email within his company. And he was talking to that very thing, and he was telling them, this is really ridiculous. If we have management that is standing in the way of cross-functional collaboration because they're stuck in silos, this is not acceptable and you must leave. So he was making some very strong statements about this. And I'll tell you, I know Southwest Airlines. I know that that's very important for them. And many, many more companies now, they know that they have to fix this. But let's face it, the organizational structures that we have always had in place are archaic and like a dinosaur. I mean, I want to call for a 52-card pickup on organizational structures because the whole world has changed around us. We have digital transformation. We have all of these products and cool, slick things, and we have this new generation of people coming into the workforce. But yet, the organizational structures and the hierarchy of that and the red tape and the politics, I mean, they are definitely influential in what's going on in our space. So I think, that's like eating the elephant in one bite right there, trying to get to companies and tell them they need to change that. But you got to get the conversation started. So I would say from an end user standpoint, you always have end users out there, and we always have, where they feel that there's a piece of the business process and they just know their piece of it in their little department silo. and they'll say, why do we do things this way? It seems so dumb, and it seems like it's just slow. Is there a better way? And many times this is what they get as an answer. No, that's just the way SAP does it, or that's just the way Oracle does it, or that's just the way whatever ERP system does it. And so the end user has nothing to lean on, and so they just accept that as the truth, and they begin to bubble up that this system stinks. This system really stinks. This system is the root of all of our problems. Well, guess what? No, it's not. The root of the problem is you're not training your end users, and you're not supporting your end users, and you don't even understand your end-to-end processes. If you understood your end-to-end processes and you shored up your end user support and training, maybe we wouldn't need all of these software systems that you're throwing at the problem. Right, Michael?
Correct. And we don't want to hold you all night long,
Yeah.
but we do want to interest you in our book because it's a short book. It's about 150 pages. It's filled with charts, filled with tables, very easy to understand. But the main thing, and it's the first thing we teach you, is how to talk to the higher-ups in your organization to justify the existence of a super user network, and from there to authorize the existence, from there to build one, and the like. And one of the main things, again, is that, as you can notice that I'm harping on, is getting them to understand the importance of end users and the role, the importance of a super user network, to stop thinking that they'll figure it out is the proper strategy, and taking it on from there. There's another problem, quite simply, around continuity. So at the top of the show, Ginger mentioned that you do already have, by hook or by crook, super users. Meaning you've got some super people in your organization who take it upon themselves not only to do their jobs, but to help others by mentoring them and helping them use the software in more intelligent ways and do a better job of fulfilling business process. The trouble is those people, if you don't support them, if you don't respect them, you're going to tire them out and you may lose them. But further, people can leave for other reasons. And I often have seen this scenario, and this is one of my favorites, where you say, okay, Jeannie, you're fired, but I want you to train Al to do everything you know by Friday. And Jeannie's not going to do that. But what happens then? Jeannie's gone, Al isn't trained, and we have a failure to communicate in charge of one end user post. Another thing is when Jeannie is trying to help other people, and her boss says to her, Jeannie, get back to your desk and do your real job, because there's no respect for the fact that she's mentoring other people and making the whole organization work better. Those are two of the greatest impediments to the ongoing solution of having super users. And so, again, to have a formalized, authorized network will help you avoid that and just plain get on with it. So, Ginger, tell them all about the book, when it's coming out, how to get it, and the rest, please.
Oh, yeah. The book, The Super User Revolution, puts the super users on the map. This book will be coming out October the 26th in conjunction with our annual event, which is in the Dallas area. And they can go up on the website, sapinsight.com, and you'll see information about the event. You'll see information about the book. And I tell you, the best way to get that book firsthand and get those autographs will be at our annual event. So hop up to sapinsight.com and you can take a look at that. Michael, why don't you give them your web address, because I think you have some information about it up there too.
Yeah, you can find all kinds of wonderful white papers, including one, I always forget the title, but you'll see it in my white papers at michaeldoane.com. Something like, your users are struggling because you're too cheap to train them, you idiot. Please read it, and you'll understand in 7 short pages everything I'm talking about here about ROI going out the back door. And at both sapinsight.com and michaeldoane.com, on the homepage, you've got a button you can click to download a preview copy of the complete table of contents, the preface, and chapter 1, entitled Drivers at Work, in PDF format. We encourage you to do so. It'll give you a good feel for what the tone of the book is, the content, and the like, as well as we hope you'll agree with us that it's going to be very, very readable.
All right, perfect. Well, let's give this a wrap, Michael. Thanks so much for getting on, and I want to let the audience know that Michael and I are going to continue with some podcasts with some great information for you, so I encourage you to follow us. And until then, y'all go be super. Y'all go be super. Y'all go be